Hello, everybody. So, let me just, actually, I don't need to full screen this. Welcome back to the second workshop of Carleton Dev Day. I'm going to be giving this presentation. This is a topic I enjoy quite a lot. Game development, it's the Godot engine, a lot of cool stuff here. This is going to be like a pretty casual kind of back and forth. I have like the chat open to the side, so if anybody asks anything, I'll be able to answer right as we go. But I'm going to be giving a workshop on Godot. Godot is a game engine. It's open source. It came out several years ago, and so it's definitely a lot newer than other engines like Unity or Unreal. But we're going to talk a little bit about what the engine does, but more importantly, what it can do for you. And so I want to start by just saying, like, I'm giving a little bit of a talk here at the beginning, but while I'm talking, I want people to go to the Godot website and download the engine. And if you have bad internet, well, I mean, if you have really bad internet, it might be a problem. But Godot is pretty small. It's like a 50 megabyte download or something like that. So I'm going to add the link to that into the chat, so you can take a look there if you like. Go get the download, get it installed. Oh, weird. Okay, here we go. So you're just going to need the standard 64-bit version. I don't assume anybody's on 32-bit, but there's an option there if you need. And we're going to get started in the engine in just a few minutes. So make sure you can have it installed. Make sure you can boot it up. It's more important that you boot Godot than you listen to what I'm going to say over the next few slides. And so I will give some insights here and there, but this is just like more of a intro presentation as you're installing Godot. And so anyways, to start off a little bit about myself. My name is Forrest. I've done all of the game dev courses at Carleton. And so I've had a lot of experience working with groups, working in different languages, working on different projects. But more importantly, for this, the context of this, I've done a lot of game jams outside of class. And so a game jam is an opportunity for people to go out and make a game over normally a short period of time, maybe a weekend, maybe a day. There's some longer ones like month-long, week-long, stuff like that. And I've participated in a lot of these jams, and I've used Godot for most of these jams. And I do want to mention as well, a lot of the sort of like the workshop that I'll be going through, I was able to work with Connor Hillen, who's the first year game development instructor at Carleton. And so he gave me a lot of ideas on sort of how to structure this, what types of things we can talk about. And so super helpful from him. Now, this workshop, we're not going to really go from the ground up in the sense that we're not going to start with a new project. We're going to start with something that is already like a completed tutorial project, and then we're going to sort of talk about the engine from there. Now, that being said, though, I think that it would be very valuable after this workshop to go and do the tutorial that led up to the point that we start at, because you'll learn a lot about how the scripting language works, how to interact with the engine. But what I want to give is a very high-level overview of a lot more of the concepts. And so for this workshop, you'll just need Godot installed. You won't have to download anything else. Well, I mean, inside of Godot, we're gonna download and install a specific project, but that shouldn't be too difficult. And so, yeah, going over the Godot engine a little bit. If I take a look at the home page here, we might think that we have like big engines. You think like Unity, Unreal, and these are what are used for like a lot of AAA games. These are what are used to create a lot of indie games and stuff like that. But you probably haven't heard of Godot in this space. And so the reason I want to talk about Godot is that it's getting a lot of popularity among small companies, medium companies, people doing game jams, people working on projects. And a lot of the reason for this is, first of all, it's open source, as I mentioned. And so there's a community of people that are working on it. And it's a very diverse community with a lot of different people with different skill sets. And so what they're able to create is sort of building on top of a lot of what current engines do and taking a lot of new approaches to things. And this is what really works well for me. I've used Unity in the past, Unity, and it allows me to really create games and be able to do stuff quite I wouldn't necessarily say elegantly, but it has a lot of functionality. Now, on the other hand, when we look at Godot, it's definitely not as full-featured as Unity. It doesn't have every edge case solved for what you might want to make, but it's a lot easier to get up and running. And so, whereas I found when I was working with Unity, it felt like I wanted to make at least a medium-sized game. With Godot, it feels a lot easier to get started with small prototypes, small games that I can iterate on. And not to mention the fact that Unity uses C# for its coding language, and Godot uses GD script, which is like a Python-esque type of language. And we're definitely going to explore that as we go along. Now, as I mentioned in this little slideshow right here, game jams are really awesome. And so we have a game jam coming up. Actually, sorry, it's already happening. The Global Game Jam 2022. And this is a game jam that I don't know the magnitude of people. I feel like the number's like around like 50,000 people will participate in this every year or something like that. Maybe it's 10,000, maybe it's 100,000. I don't know exactly, but in that magnitude. It's the biggest game jam in the world. Happens once a year, end of January. And it's an opportunity for people to just make games, whether it be a tabletop game like a pen and paper game, or a maybe like an interactive game in some engine that allows you to like write interactive stories, or a platformer or whatever. You can make a game, and each year there's a theme that they'll put out. And this year's theme is pretty cool. I've had some awesome design conversations about this with some people. I won't tell you what the theme is, because one of the big ideas behind the Global Game Jam is that you can go and take a look at the theme video. It's like yourself, and kind of see like what it makes you think of. Because if I say it right now, then like you won't be as inspired by all of the different meanings of it as if you watch the video, I think. So it's definitely a fun game jam. I'm participating this year. Hoping to have something. We're going to focus a lot more next week on making something, or next weekend rather. We like to keep it like a condensed a game jam. And the reason I say that is because this year is going from January 20th to 30th, whereas normally it's only like 3 days over a weekend. So, anyways, now that we've had a few minutes here, let's hop into the engine. And so I'm going to assume that everybody has it installed. Throughout the talk, if you are running into problems, if you are like falling behind, or something's not ready for you, put in the chat so I know where people are. But likely I'll keep moving forward and not try to debug too much, just because I only have a short amount of time. And now that being said, if I arrive at the end of everything I want to say and it's still before 3, then I'll go into more depth and some troubleshooting stuff. But for now, we won't. Okay, I guess I need to stop screen. Oh, a big version of me. I need to switch over to Godot here. And I think it's going to be a little bit finicky. I wish I could share my whole screen, but I'm on Linux, and sometimes, or if I said full screen, you see all 4 of my monitors, and that wouldn't be great. Godot Engine Project Manager. Yes, let's do this. All right, so here's what you see when you boot up Godot. Actually, more specifically, you'll see this screen right here. I just exit out of what I was searching. So this is like your sort of your project menu. You're able to choose which project you want to work on. You could go create a new project, but for now, we're going to start with a base, so that we can have something right away to play with. Now, I am thinking one thing that is going to suck is that in Godot, when I try to play the game, it might not show up on stream. So I'll have to take a look at that in a second. I don't want to set up OBS to try and like double cam setup in the way that I would normally would. But let's so we're going to go to Asset Library Project, and we're going to type in Dodge. And so this is the tutorial that if you go to, I think the Godot documentations, it's like the first one for 2D. So we're going to want the 2D Dodge the Creeps demo. And so this is a little example program that, and we'll see it in just a second. I just want to make sure people are at this screen. They typed in Dodge. You click on this, and then it's going to bring this up. So this is like a little demo of a game where you move around, and you have to try to stay alive for as long as you can. And stuff will try to run into you and eat you or kill you or whatever. And so what we're going to do. Oh, wait. Oh, my gosh. I almost clicked on the stream view. Oh, no, actually, that's correct. Okay. Streaming's hard. So we're going to click download. We're going to choose a path. I'm just going to go into documents. Now, you can browse. I don't want to browse just because I don't know what's on my computer at that path. Dev day demo. Also, you can leave the project name as the other thing. I'm just choosing this. I'm going to create a folder. It creates an empty folder, and I'm going to install and edit. Now, it's going to, okay, so it's going to get stuck on this screen. Let me just stop sharing and go and share my other screen here. So I want Godot Engine. And essentially what happened is after you hit install, then it should bring up a second screen here. Or it would bring up like the full engine. I'm just trying to Godot Workshop. I'm feeling like I might have to. I don't know, Matt. You're muted, I think, right? Um, you're here. I'm just gonna pull you onto stream for just a second because I think I need to leave studio and then rejoin so that Firefox. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, viewers. We are doing a little waiting in this intermission. Unfortunately, technical difficulties arise. Seems Forrest is back.
Yeah, it seems that I'm back. We shall see if. Oh wait, no, it's been here the whole time. It's just that it didn't have the Godot name. Okay.
No.
I'm gonna make my project editor quite large just because then we can like see all of the stuff I'm talking about. But yours will probably be smaller. It will be better set up around the screen and stuff like that. Okay. Anyways, so a few things I wanted to mention right off the bat. This sort of workshop, this walkthrough, I'll be staying in the context of Godot. This isn't saying that other engines are necessarily like bad, and I don't want to like do comparisons. It's just like it's not worth going into all of that at the time, I think. Also, platform-wise, Godot runs on Windows, Mac, Linux, probably whatever you have, it will work just fine. And so it should be all right to get up and running, put anything in chat if it's not working. But anyways, let's take a look here at the engine. We're going to start up by just hitting the play button. So this is going to play the project that we have. And I feel like it's not going to share. Okay, so you don't see what I see. If you hit it on your engine, it will pop up a window of the game and you can hit start and play it. And I'm trying to think if there's a way for me to do this very nicely. And I don't think there is. So this talk is going to stay mostly in the engine. We're going to go over concepts in the engine. We're not going to go over concepts while it's running too much. And so my objective with this workshop is that you get introduced to some of the main concepts that we see in the engine. But then after this workshop, you're able to go and just be a lot more confident to start using it and potentially build a game for the Global Game Jam. So playing with Godot, we have, as we can see here, there's a lot going on. On the left-hand side, we got like this thing that sort of has a lot of different what are called nodes. And so there's stuff that represents music. There's stuff that represents like the display that we see. We have like this color rec that's a little bit blue. And if I hide it, we can see like what it is exactly. One of the really great things about Godot is its ability to very rapidly prototype, very easily move things around. And one of the ways I wanted to show is like when we're running the game, I'm able to edit stuff in the editor and have it change in real time in the game. And so instead of having to reboot, get to back to the same place in the game and start from there, it's a lot easier to, for example, like if I changed the color of this, like if it was running, which it won't right now, but I could go like this, and then in the game it would also change that color. So super useful there. Can I? Yeah, okay, I'll undo that color. And as we can see, we are starting with a pretty fully fledged project. We have this like all of the files over here. We've got a lot of TSCN files. So this is like the scene that we see here. We have a lot of GD files. And so this is like a script. So let's take a look at one of these maybe. So I'm just going to make this the big screen here. When we do a lot of coding, we are often familiar in like maybe first year with this idea of an IDE, like an integrated development environment. And so what an engine, like a game engine, really helps you with is tying together the fact that you're creating a game alongside the fact that you are going to be editing code. You're going to be doing like a lot of different types of interaction to create this game. And so some stuff that's out of scope of the engine, like a lot of the art that you create will be done in something like maybe Photoshop, some external program. But then you bring assets in and you do a lot of work with assets in game, or sorry, in the engine. So anyways, we pulled up some code here. I feel like I'm not able to easily kill this bottom half unless there's something I'm forgetting. But anyways, we'll just do a quick walk through some of the code here. As we can see here, we have like functions. the easiest way to think about it is that it's very similar to Python in a lot of ways. We have functions, indentation, defines scope, and so I know like this function ends right here because this next function is back on the first indentation line. And we're doing a lot of things in a sort of like declarative way. Like we're saying like we want the score timer to stop. We want the mob timer to stop. We want music to stop. We want the death sound to play. And so that makes sense. It's the game over. And so the way that we're writing a lot of this stuff, we're interacting with something in the engine and we're telling it to do something. And then taking a look at some of the code down here, this type of function, we can sort of just read through it. It has a lot of documentation, but we can take a look here and see, okay, mob timer timeout. What does that mean? I guess like a timer of an enemy runs out and we're going to do something. We're going to get some type of node, which is like a spawn location. We're going to do some math here. We're going to do something where it's like doing mob dot position. So maybe we're setting the position of the mob. And so we can read through the code pretty easily. It's not anything that should be jumping out as like completely strange, I think. Okay. So to keep walking through the sort of layout that we see here, we'll go back to the 2D scene. And so right now we're in the script view. Let's go back to the 2D view. And I'll click this button to make it a little bit smaller again. So let's walk through this idea of what we see here on the left, the scene tree. And so we can see that we have a lot of different sort of objects here. So we have like this color rect, and this represents something visual on the screen. And then we have whatever this player is, which is up here. And this will probably represent the player character. And then we have some like less tangible things. So for example, we have the mob timer. This isn't on the screen at all, but it does have properties that can be handled. And then similarly, we have the start position. And so this is just a position on the screen. It doesn't have any visual component other than the fact that it's showing a little icon here, but it doesn't show in game. And then we can take a look here at the HUD. And so when we click on this, it doesn't actually show us what it contains, but we can see that it has this little video button here. And so what this allows us to do is click on it and then go into a different scene. And so before, we can see at the top here, we were at the main scene, and now we've gone into the HUD scene. And so we're taking a look at how the sort of user interface is being composed. In the main scene, it does require this user interface. But if we had all of that all of how the user interface should look, it would really clutter up this scene tree. Like we'd have to have more nodes inside of here, and that wouldn't be so great. And so if we take a look at the HUD instead, we can see, well, it breaks down into the score label. We have the message label. We have a start button. And then again, we have a less tangible thing, the timer. And so we can hide any one of these and see like how they're interacting and stuff like that. If we take a look at the message label, maybe let's figure out, well, what makes it look like this? And so we can see over here, it says dodge the creeps. So maybe instead of dodge the creeps, I could say dodge the monster or something like that. And it's aligned to the center, and we can change a lot of different options here. And so what I kind of want to show about this is that we've gone into a single node, we've gone into the message label, and we've been able to change quite a lot of different options about it. And Godot is set up in a very object-oriented way. And the easiest way we can see this is that in this editor, although we are editing settings about the label, we also have a parent of it be a control. And so inside a control, we can also go and edit some other sections. And then let me just make it a little bit smaller here. So we can see, okay, well, what's after control? Then it goes to canvas item, and we have some more options. And then it goes to node, and we have some more options. Well, let's look at something completely different. Let's look at message timer. We can see from here, timer only has a little bit of information and then goes directly to node. And so the way we look at this is that timer inherits node. And similarly, message label, or in this case, it's a label type, inherits control, which means that it gets all of its parameters. And that inherits canvas item, which gets its parameters. And that inherits node, which gets all of its parameters. And then if we look at something that's also like a UI type of element, the sort of same green color over here, the start button, we can see that we have button, which inherits base button, which inherits control, which we also saw on message label. And so each one of these comes with different options that we can change, but it makes it very standard. So if I'm editing a UI element, I know I can interact with it in the same way that I can interact with other UI elements because they share the same inherited functionality. Okay. And so we've taken a little bit of a look through the scene tree. We've taken a little bit of a look through editing some parameters, and a little bit about how the object-oriented side of Godot works. So let's go back to the main scene here, and maybe let's explore the player a little bit, because we've looked at like what the game looks like, the UI, the buttons I can push. But what about the player? The player is a little bit different because it does look like something, but clearly, like as I'm going through the game, I want to be able to control the player. And so we can see the player up here, and we see we have the same scene button. And so I can click on this, and it's going to let me explore the player side, or the player scene. And inside of here, this one's quite a lot different. It has blue icons instead. And so blue icons imply that it's going to be eventually inherit from node 2D. Where inside of the HUD, since it was green, we knew it would eventually inherit from control. And so blue ones, this is about making a 2D scene. And so in this case, we have like an animated sprite. We can see that, oh, well, do I have an easy way to show this off? If I go to animation, no, okay. I don't think I can toggle. Oh yeah, okay, there we go, cool. So with this animation, I can play like the right animation, and then maybe I can play like the up animation. Oh, and so you can see like the little eye changes. And so up looks like this, it will switch between these two frames, and right looks like this, it will switch between these two frames. And so this comes back to the idea that we're tying a lot of different functionality into the engine. We have what we're seeing in the sort of like in this window that represents what we see in the game. We have the inspector, which means that we can inspect properties that are based on the current node. And then we also have this animation window that's going to help us set up animations based on sprites. So if we're thinking of a 2D game, you might have a character that has like a fighting animation or a walking animation or a sleeping animation, anything like that. Now, we also have some other stuff going on here. So we have a collision shape. And this will make sure that if this collision shape touches something else, we can either say they should bounce off each other. We can say if they touch, then this thing should die. We can say a lot of stuff with collision shapes and how they interact with other collision shapes. And so even though I wasn't able to show you how this game works, and I'm trying to think if I don't think there's an easy way for me to be able to share. Actually, we'll just run it, and then I'm just going to share my screen here quickly. We're going to go like this. We're going to go share screen, and I'm going to select dodge the creep. Okay. So, oh wait, dodge the monster. That's a new name of the game. So, maybe you can hear it. I'm not sure. It's pretty loud, so hopefully it's not too bad. But as we can see, my character it moves around, and if something runs into me, I die. So pretty nice and simple game. But we can also take a look at the animations we were just looking at. So as I'm moving up, or when I'm moving down, we have the eyes pointing forward. But then as I'm moving right, or I'm moving left, we see that the animation does a little bit of a different thing there. All right. So now that we've seen the game a little bit, so this is what the game that we started with, this is what it uses. And let me share my screen here again, back to Godot. Player scene, perfect. There we go. Okay, so as we saw in the game, I can move the player up and down. I could get the player to interact with stuff. When it collided with something else, it died. We also have this trail, which is a particle effect. The tutorial explains it very well. You might have seen as we were moving, like a little bit of stuff behind us as we moved around. So I'm not going to go too deep into that because the tutorial does a very good job, and I think people should do the tutorial afterwards. But what I do want to do right now is kind of take a look at how we think about scenes. And so as I'm creating the player here, maybe like I came up with an idea for a gem. I want this player to be able to jump up and down. I want it to interact with the ground maybe. So maybe let's say this is a platformer instead. We're using this character. It's the exact same character, except it's able to jump up and down like in Mario. So what I might do is say, okay, well, I'm like a lot of the way there already. The animation I have, maybe when I'm jumping, it plays this animation. And then when I'm on the ground, I'm going to make a new animation for that. So I'm going to say like walking. Now, since I don't have any extra animation frames for this, then I'm just going to use the example of me in like this position right here. And okay, let's do this. So this is like now the walking animation, okay? And so I've kind of put together how the player looks, but now I have to think about how the player functions. And so let's take a look at what the player is doing in this current version of the game. And so in the game that comes from the tutorial, we're dodging the creeps, and the player, although it looks like something, it also has to have functionality. And so we'll take a look here at the player's script. So I just have to go up to the top of player, and I can click on this little scroll right here, and it will bring me into the code. And now I'm going to go back to full screen so that we only see the code here. And let's take a read through this. So we start off at the top, extending area 2D. As I mentioned, the player is eventually inheriting from area 2D, so it needs to, this is like the same thing that you'd see in other object-oriented languages when you inherit, like when you're making a class that inherits or something like that. We have some class attributes here, which are effectively like just attributes of the script, but if we're thinking in object-oriented terms, they are attributes of the class. And then we have different functions that will run. And so the first one that you'll see in pretty much any script is the ready function. And what this says is when this node, the player, is loaded in, run this script. And so we're going to say, okay, we're going to get the screen size, and that's going to get the viewport rectangle size. And then we're going to also hide. And when we hide without saying like what it's related to, then we're talking about the class itself or the node itself. So in this case, we're saying player hide. Then another really big function is the process function. And this function runs once every single frame. And it takes a parameter called delta. This parameter is how much time has elapsed since the last frame. And the reason that this is important is because if we're doing something like physics, if we're jumping up and down, we're going to want to change how fast we're moving based on the delta. So that let's say like a computer lagged for a second and you had to wait for it to like come back, or like it froze, whatever. Then that might take like 500 milliseconds or something, which is significantly longer than the rest of your frames. And if you don't account for that, then you're going to have like really weird movement that doesn't look so great. And so that's like more of a game development topic. Essentially, the way that we use delta is whenever we're doing something with velocity or position, well, I guess just velocity, you always just multiply it by delta. So in this case right here, we can see we're changing our position by velocity times delta. So this functionality already has quite a lot put in here. It has the ability to move the character right and left and down and up. And all we're doing to make these work is we're saying if the input button is pressed, then and it's the move right button, and so we've set that up in the Godot editor, then we're going to increase the x velocity by 1. And similarly, if we move up or down, then we're going to increase or decrease the y velocity by 1. And then what's velocity? Well, we can take a look up here. We can see that velocity starts by equaling vector.0. And I'm just going to go like, make this a little bit more clear. We're going to go like vector to 0, 0. Now, if I wanted to introduce something like gravity, for example, what I might do to make sure that the player always is falling down is initially set up the y direction to always be, well, let's move it down. So we increase by 1. So we want to always set like it to start out as 1. So in this case, if we're pressing up, it will cancel it out and it won't change in the x or y position. But then if we're pressing down, you'll start falling faster. But if you don't press anything, you'll just normally move down. Now, I don't want to dive too deep into necessarily going through this script because, again, I want to stay very high level. I want you to be able to go through the tutorial that Godot has. And actually, let me just pull up this tutorial quickly. I'm just going to toss it in chat. Godot dodge the creeps. I'm going to put it in the Discord chat for anybody who's wanting to check it out afterwards. Okay. So now that we've kind of taken a look at like what scripts are, kind of how we think in the process of adding functionality to characters, or well, rather to anything, you add functionality to nodes, and those can represent anything. one of the bigger parts that I want to get across in this talk, is like the sort of macro view of how we go about thinking about game development when we're using Godot. And so coming back to this 2D scene here, we've taken a look at the scene tree. We've seen that to create the player, I'm going to have a scene that I'm working inside. I'm going to have several different components that I'm putting together to make it look like something. Maybe I would add like a timer to every 2 seconds, make them jump or something like that. And I would add that in here as well. We've also taken a look on the right-hand side in the inspector. If I click on something, I'm able to edit settings. We've sort of seen what the object-oriented side of things looks like. We looked at animations. We've looked at like the file system sort of. Now I want to sort of dive into what we think when we're making a scene. And I have a little topic on here. Ah, yes. Okay. So when we're making a scene, we're sort of composing a lot of things together. And so we start by thinking what it needs to be. Well, the player, we need it to be something we can see on screen. We need it to have a collision box so we can interact with other stuff. We need it to have particles so that we can see a trail moving behind it. And oftentimes, when we think of these needs of what we want to create, we're going to be able to start thinking about how to compose it through nodes. And so what we haven't looked at just yet is like how we create like this animation node, collision shape node, trail. And so if I click on player, I can click this plus button to add another child node. And we can see here there's a ton of nodes. But if we break it down again, I'm working in a very small subset. Well, not super small, but a subset of all of these here. So the red spatial circle, this is talking about 3D stuff that you can use, and we're not building a 3D game right now. The green circle is control, and so this is UI elements, stuff that I'd interact with, stuff that would sit on the screen all of the time. Or not necessarily all the time, but like I want to have my game menu visible there throughout the entire game. Or if I'm at the main menu, I want it to be like persistently having this button there. But then third of all, we have the blue circle, which is node 2D. So let's take a look in here. Well, we can see we have the animated sprite, we have whatever bone 2D is, camera 2D, light 2D. There's a lot of different things that have a lot of different traits about them. And so, for example, a light, it might make the screen look different based on what's there. Whereas if we think of what a path is something that that maybe a character might follow, maybe a like when you level up or something like that, you'll have like something pop off and like it will move around a little bit. You can use path for a lot of different things in your scenes, but then path is very different than the light that we just looked at. It's like a very it solves a very different problem. And then similarly, we have a tile map. Maybe if we're creating a game where you like explore a world that's just a whole bunch of tiles composed together, we'd use like the tile map here. And then we also have some very generic ones. And so, for example, the audio stream player. And so when we were at the main scene, we saw that there was like music playing during the game and that there's music when the player dies. And so the point I want to make is that when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're trying to create something, oftentimes as programmers, we think, okay, well, if I want to create this, what functionality can I code to make this happen? But in the terms of Godot and other game engines at this high level, what we want to say is, how can I accomplish this with the nodes that I'm given? And so imagine if you had to create like the particles as something moves around, which so particles do play. Oh, perfect. Okay, so as I drag this around, we can see the particles happening behind it. And if I had to code that, I could probably make this like a shader. I could probably do this, adding some code to say, okay, we'll take the like what the player or what's on screen right now, and then track that for different frames backwards and do that. But instead, we can add this functionality through editing what the particle 2D system does. And so in this case, it takes a texture of the player. It has like a certain amount of them, so I believe this means that there will be 10 of them behind you. We can also see that they have a lifetime of 1 second. If I turn this up, maybe I set it to like, okay, this is like way too high. Let's set it like 5 seconds. Yeah, so look at that. So now each one takes a lot longer to die. And And let me set this to like 60. So now 60 of them can follow me. And so sort of as I'm going through this, I'm able to make a lot of different things happen by just editing some different values here. And so instead of trying to solve this problem by creating the code that does it for me, I'm able to, at a very high level, use the node's abilities that it has about it. And so coming back to this idea, we're putting a scene together. We've added some stuff for the way, like how it looks. We've taken a look at some of the problems of what behavior does it need? How am I able to do this through nodes? What do nodes provide me? And then we start to think about what does a script look like for this? And so the player right now, oops, daisy. I'm just going to go and reset it back to where, like right at the beginning. So I can go to the node 2D, which has like the transform information about where it's moved to. I'm just going to click this reset button to put it right back at the beginning. We're then going to go and remove the script for that's being used for the player right now. So I'm just going to click, oops daisy, the drop down, and I'm just going to clear it. And let's create a new script. So we're going to call this player2.gd. So just a script by itself, it has some boilerplate stuff. But let's think back in terms of we have a player that we want jumping up and down. I'm not going to go through and code too much of it, primarily because I don't have something I'm copying off of, and it definitely won't work in the next 9 minutes. But instead, let's just comment through some of what we would expect to have. And so we're going to have our function process. And so this is what happens every frame. So first of all, we're going to say like, I guess I need to pass so that it stops complaining about that. But we're going to have get input every frame, move character based on movement. And then maybe let's say like we're building a game like Mario and we're going to go and collect coins and stuff like that. So what I might be inclined to do is say like, see if we've collected any coins. And we're asking this in player because player obviously is the one collecting coins. But instead, we're going to run into a problem where we're going to write a lot of functionality inside of player that might be best somewhere else. And so if we're trying to, when we run into a coin and collect it, maybe it's better to say that if the put a script on a coin and then say to the coin, if a player runs into you, tell that player that you've run into them. And so how this might look is that we have a separate coin scene set up. It has its own collision shape. And when once some trigger happens, in which case like the player runs into the coin, then it's able to send what's called a signal back to the player. And this pattern is pretty prevalent in game development, this observer pattern of being able to send signals from different parts of the program to tell something what's happened. And one of the big reasons that we like to use this is because it allows us to decouple a lot of logic. For example, like if it was up to the player all the time to see if it's bumping into coins, then it might not be able to, or then we start to have to write functionality inside of the player that would decide what might happen once, or what might happen to the coin. We'd have to say, okay, now player delete coin, and that doesn't sound as good as saying to the coin, if a player runs into you, delete yourself, because now that's like a lot more self-contained. And so there's a lot of software architecture ideas that we start to think about, and there's a lot of guides that can sort of help you through understanding a lot of this. So instead of see if you collected any coins, I'm gonna instead have coin collected, and this is going to be a signal function. And so it's going to and I don't know the exact syntax off the top of my head that would make this look right. If this function is called, a coin was collected. And so in this case, what I might be able to say is player, so I'm going to go var num of coins equals 0. And then down here, I'm able to say self.num of coins plus equals 1. And right here, now, if the coin did call this function from inside player, so it did it across a signal, then inside of here I can say, okay, well, I'm going to increase the number of coins for myself by 1, but I don't have to worry about what it means to the coin that it was collected. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to sort of skip a few other things that aren't super duper important, and say, so as I mentioned, the tutorial that you can follow for Godot, it will show you a lot of sort of what we've gone through, but also walk you through a lot of the ideas on how to create nodes, how you're going to create scenes, and then give you more documentation that you can follow based on that. With this knowledge that you have from being able to sort of play around with Godot, work through a tutorial, there's a lot of other tutorials that are out there that will get you started working on maybe like a platformer game, working on a tile map game, even working on a 3D game. I want to show this off quickly. So we've been doing a lot of 2D stuff here. Like the main screen 2D. Well, I mean, okay, this arguably could be in a 3D game. It's just a user interface, but the player itself is 2D. Godot does include a fully featured 3D environment as well. And I'm able to switch to it even though I'm in a 2D project, although most of the time, well, I haven't found, well, actually, no, I have found a reason to do 2D inside of 3D, but 3D inside of 2D, that's pretty wacky and wild. You can do some fun stuff probably with it though. But most of the time, you're making a project, it's either going to be 2D or 3D. And so inside of here, you'll have maybe, let's see if I can quickly, well, okay, I'm making another scene. I'm going to make this a 3D scene. I'm just going to buzz through this a little bit quickly. I'm going to go into spatial. I will be able to see maybe, let me just search mesh. I want a mesh instance. This mesh is going to be a capsule. Is it really that small? Or no, wait, I'm probably zoomed in too much. What's going on here? Okay, something's going on because I should be seeing a mesh right there. All right, anyways. I made a 3D game last year in Godot for the Global Game Jam. It was a lot easier than I thought to do a lot of stuff in 3D. And so um, if I could get you to take anything from this sort of like workshop, this walkthrough of Godot, it's that to start out working on something, to me, it felt a lot more. I was able to have a lot more agency over what I was creating as like a new Godot developer than when I was working with Unity, and I've touched Unreal a little bit, not too much. It's a lot easier to learn for beginner developers because it uses a scripting language that's similar to Python. And even if it's your first time picking it up, you can definitely make something for the Global Game Jam. There's a lot of tutorials that you can follow, and starting from the point of a tutorial. So like, let's say I wanted to start from this game where we have a character being chased by other enemies, and if it collides with them, it dies. You can start with that as a basis to make some really awesome things. And so I'll probably leave it off here for now. I'll be around all day. If you have questions about Godot, if you have questions about anything game dev related, feel free to pass them on to me. And I hope that some of this was helpful in kind of getting used to Godot Editor. We didn't dive into too much of like iterating on ideas just because you can't share the screen too easily. But yeah, next up for the Carleton Dev Day. Oops, it's the wrong screen here. At 3 o'clock, we have an introduction to artificial intelligence. So do stick around to check that out. And thank you for coming out. I don't know which StreamYard screen I'm on. Oh, no, too many tabs. Oh, here it is.